Coming at you from fabulous Las Vegas. I'm here for like a day and a half for the AI4 event where I gave a talk on the path to AGI and how the business world will be transformed along the path to true AGI, which is sort of an outlier at this event, which is more focused on immediate business applications of LLMs. This huge trade show floor full of basically vibe-coded head wrappers around LLM API calls, carrying out various practical corporate functions from compliance to prediction, risk management, recruiting, blah, 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 blah. We also had a booth showing off our cute little robot, Cody the Mind Child, who's getting smarter every day. Played a bit with some other robots, like the AGI bot robots, which, in spite of the name, don't have too much AGI, but they have a lot of physical capability. Not as good at the back flips as the Unitary robots, but have been designed for a bunch of practical applications. But I'm still processing in my mind everything from the AGI conference last week in San Francisco, which was a whole different story, right? Like AI4, huge, how many people? Feels like tens of thousands of people in a casino Venetian, which is an interesting contrast between intelligence and stupidity, right? And sort of a throwback in my mind to my youth, because I lived in Vegas for 4 years, from '89 to 1993 was my first job after my PhD. I was a professor in the math department at the University of Las Vegas, back before Vegas was such a family destination, like after casinos were still owned by mafia back then. Spent a little time card counting blackjack with friends, which turned out to be very boring, even though I was okay with it. A lot of the buildings in Vegas are brand new, and they bash down and rebuild skyscrapers frequently just for marketing reasons, right? But of course, that level of refresh and rebuild and progress in a way, progress in making amazing, big, shiny things. I mean, this doesn't compare to the level of progress we've seen in the sorry, didn't caught my throat, in the AI field recently, right? I mean, the speed of progress we saw at the AGI conference in San Francisco State University, beautiful campus, a lot of big grassy fields. I enjoy it much more than the Venetian casino as an old hippie who doesn't enjoy gambling when the odds are stacked against me too much. I've been doing AGI conference since 2006, and I'd say between 1 year's conference and the next year's conference, like there's never ever been such an insane amount of progress just across the board. I mean, so many people's little AGI projects making so much progress from the previous year, and I'm not going to turn this into a rundown on AGI event because I had something else I wanted to talk about. But yeah, looking at all the talks on predictive coding, I mean, we're seeing predictive coding as an alternate way of training neural nets, known for being an academic curiosity, to something that really works, right? I mean, from someone on our own Singularity team has got predictive coding to train transformers up to the GPT-2 scale. I mean, Will Gephardt with Alex Orby as PhD students, reported using spiking neural nets to do assignment of credit using predictive coding based learning. now that you have the next big practical commercial model coming out the next month using predictive coding rather than backprop, but you can see that the learning curve that backprop did over many decades is being done for predictive coding over years because of accelerated change and these alternate ways of training neural nets, which we've known for a long time are in principle capable of doing continual learning, keep updating the weights through each interaction rather than you have to freeze the weights and then interact with it and it doesn't learn. So that the network is always living in eternal now, like the guy in the movie Memento, right? We've always known predictive coding had these sorts of advantages, and you can see now, like in 1 year from last year to this year, there's been so much more progress in getting predictive coding to do useful stuff at the prototype level. I mean, level of 100 million parameter network. It's not trillions of parameters, but it's also not a toy model, right? And then, we had our little Cody robot there at the AGI conference, and he was running our Omega Claw agent. And as the robot struggled to play hide and seek on stage, kind of narrating his stream of consciousness, I didn't is he over there? No, he's not over there. Well, right? Someone said he was behind me, but I didn't see him. Maybe I haven't turned around all the way. He's dumb, he's not good at hide and seek, but he's narrating his stream of consciousness in a thoughtful way that grounds what he's saying, what he's perceiving, and what he's doing. And then when you ask him to bring to mind something that happened a week before, he can do that. He has a working long-term memory, right? So that very exciting for those of us working with the robot, because until we upgraded Cody to Omega Claw, kind of every time you turned him on was a new life form, right? He had certain long-term memory knowledge, but he didn't have a running episodic memory of his whole life, which is really, it's important in itself. It's also a prerequisite for lifelong learning, for cognitive development, and prerequisite for metacognition, because how can you really think about your thinking effectively if you can't build up a body of knowledge about your thinking over time and see how accurate your different thoughts about your thinking have been, put your thoughts about thinking into practice, and treat it as inner scientific experiments, right? All that is opened up by having functioning long-term memory, which is now they're in Cody, you need to port to Omega Claw. We had a lot of discussion at the AGI event about consciousness and will AGI be conscious even if it seems generally intelligent. And this honestly doesn't fascinate me that much right now, just because I worked through all these issues back in the 80s, and I feel like having all these powerful AI tools to play with hasn't necessarily changed anyone's view on consciousness. Like if you believe AGIs were going to be conscious because they acted conscious in 1980, you still believe that. If you believe they were going to be conscious because the patterns flowing in their minds are similar to the patterns flowing in a human brain, you're going to believe that. If you believe they can't be conscious because they're not made of meat, you're going to believe that. I felt like the same perspectives on the AGI consciousness that have been around since forever are still being enacted over and over. Whether that will still be the case once AGIs clearly display human level and superhuman intelligence, I'm not sure. As I've said before, I think connecting our brains in with AGI minds and connecting our brains in with other human brains and with bottles of orange juice. That sort of subjective mind melding may give us a different view, because we can then potentially feel the consciousness of an AGI inside our own brain when we wire our brains into it, and see if that feeling of wiring our brain into an AGI is similar to wiring our brain into a human, rather than wiring our brain into a bottle of orange juice. Right? So there's that potential, I think, through brain-brain interface and brain-computer interface to make actual headway on AGI consciousness. Until then, it's just people debating the same things with each other over and over again. My view remains, as it always has been, consciousness is immanent in the fabric of the universe and manifested in different ways in different systems. The manifestation of consciousness in a certain kind of system is tied largely to the emergent patterns coursing around in that system as it does things. Not just to the behaviors, but the emergent patterns in the system, between the system and the environment. But my read is, though, a lot of people are assuming new level AGI is coming very soon. And if they're not of the sort to be worried about whether it will kill everyone or take everyone's jobs, they're worrying about whether it will really be conscious or not, right? And I guess they're also raising the specter, like, what if AGI does exterminate everyone? Not only is that bad because we care about humans, what if conscious life is exterminating itself in favor of non-conscious automata simulating life, right? That's even worse than being replaced by another conscious species. So the other thing that came out of the AGI conference, among so many things, which was exciting, was a cross-pollination of neural and symbolic AI seems to be getting real. So, often the most interesting things in the conference are the conversations in the hallway rather than the talks, right? So one of the conversations we had in the hallway was, hey, can we use Will Gephardt's spiking neural nets for assignment of credit? Can we use this to help with inference control in our probabilistic logic network? So in our work on PLN, Hyperon's probabilistic logic network reasoning framework, which we talked about a lot in the Hyperon workshop on the first day of the AGI conference, I mean, one thing we're playing with is geodesic inference. Like, you do some forward chain inference, we go from your assumptions toward your hoped-for conclusions. You go do some backward chain inference, where you go from your hoped-for conclusions to things that would imply those hoped-for conclusions. And then you try to grow your forward searches toward your backward searchers, try to grow your backward searches toward your forward searchers. And you can have them send out cheap statistical probes, like a forward searcher sends a probe to see whether it can reach a backward one. Backward searcher sends a probe to see if it can reach a forward one. By sending those statistical probes, the forward and backward searchers know how to search toward each other. So we realized that Will Gephardt's spiking neural nets with a special way of managing time dependence, they may be better than statistical probes at sort of processing the whole knowledge graph and figuring out what's the best path from A to B. So, like, have a big symbolic knowledge graph, a big atom space, like Hyperon does, where you have logical relationships, little programs, facts about the world, abstractions of perception and experience. Take that and then treat it as a neural network, ignoring some of the logical details. Run it as one of Will Gephardt's spiking neural nets. Use some of the parameters of the uncertain logical knowledge in the neural net, just in the knowledge graph, just as some of the parameters in the neural net. Let the spiking neural net do its thing, and then identify paths for reasoning algorithms to follow. Right? So that's neurosymbolic connectivity, not via having one box over here, another box over here. This box is neural, this box is symbolic. Right? It's neural symbolic connectivity by having neural algorithms and symbolic algorithms operating the same knowledge graph in real time, with the neural guiding the symbolic and the symbolic guiding the neural. I wanted this shit to happen in web mind cognition in the late 90s, and now we're seeing concrete dimensions it may take, and we have scalable tooling for exploring it. Popping into my head also was a talk by John Laird, who's been working to an AGI even longer than me, right? And John gave a talk on what he calls the common model of cognition, which is a sort of a boxes and lines diagram model of the structures and processes that cognitive science says human minds contain, which include episodic memory, declarative memory, working memory, procedural learning, reasoning, perceptual pattern recognition, emotion, social cognition, metacognition, and one obvious point is LLMs are lame at most of these. They can kind of simulate many in a shallow way, but in the end, they're good at only very few of the processes that human minds do. Not necessarily an issue in the business context right now, because there's humans there too, right? And if LLMs are super good at doing certain things, humans can fill in for the episodic memory and the metacognition and all the missing cognitive aspects. No? It's interesting to have that grounding. And then John and I had a sort of amusing debate on. He's talking a lot about how human deliberative thinking, that what we typically think of as conscious, though I think everything is conscious. Talking a lot about how deliberative thinking proceeds sequentially, step by step. And I'm like, well, often, but why is that important? Why can't I make an omega claw hive that proceeds 100 things at once? And he's like, well, human mind doesn't do that. Human society does that. And indeed, that comes back to the notion of a mindplex I formulated a long time ago. Like, you can have an artificial cognition, something that's more unified in society, less unified than an individual human mind. You can have multiple cognitive threads proceeding independently in parallel, more so than the human brain can, the level of explicit deliberative thinking, but yet these threads can cross-pollinate, share intermediate state, better than two human minds trapped in two separate bodies, right? And John, in the end, was happy enough that he's trying to describe closely human-like cognition, whereas I'm more so trying to make maximally smart machines that will be kind to people and understand people, that can upload themselves even smarter machines. And you can see that for my goal, having multiple threads of consciousness like an omega hive, maybe the best thing, right? I've gone on long enough. I want to tell everyone to look at Joe Shabak's talk in the AGI conference on machine consciousness. I won't try to summarize it. Let me say, I don't agree with all his views on how to get to AGI or not, but he invented a very amusing new religion in the middle of his talk. It was super funny as well as intellectually insightful. My fireside chat with Gary Marcus, basically highlighting why neural symbolic AI is a very valuable path to follow, and why, while world modeling is needed, it's really something that should come out of the overall unified cognitive activity of a mind, rather than like an isolated box, and you figure out what goes in that golden box, and everything will work, right? So, yeah, way too much going on at the conference to summarize. And the final point I want to highlight is more methodological. I mean, just the number of people, both experienced researchers, like old hands who are not that technical, even business people, project manager types, and young people in their teens making big progress on implementing AI using hives of agents. Like, this was a big methodological shift, right? Like, it's just like February this year, the coding models got good enough. You can really turn over non-trivial AI development projects to them without fixing their problems, taking more time than coding yourself would have. And only the last few months using claw agents to orchestrate the coding agents is really the best way to do things. Now the last month I've been using Omega claw agents rather than open claw agents to do AI development for me. But at the AGI conference in particular, it's not just people using agentic as a buzzword like you hear all over AI 4 conference. I mean, it's people doing hardcore AGI research and development and building products on top of the current AGI system, right? Text messaging with their hives of Omega Claw, Open Claw, Hermes Claw agents, right? And it seems like people are making insanely fast progress this way, and that does make me reflect on, like, okay, Kurzweil says you love AGI 2029, like, yeah, it could be 2029, could be 2027, could be 2031, but I've thought that Kurzweil's gap between 2029 for human level AGI and 2045 for super AI is too long, because once the AGIs are doing the development, it's going to be a different exponent of change, because the AIs are driving the change, right? And you wonder to what extent the exponent of change on Kurzweil's graphs will hold up now that AI agents are doing so much of the work. I mean, to an extent, of course, that's baked in. That's part of the exponential acceleration he was charting in his book. The singularity is near, but I mean, things are going so fast. One wonders if it will beat the Kurzweilian 2029 estimate, because we're shifting so much to AIs rather than humans driving more and more of the development. And like we can see, we have recursive self-improvement now, even in Omega Claw, even though it's not yet. And a human level of general intelligence, right? So that's very interesting, and that brings me to what I thought I was going to talk about in this recording, actually, which is some work we brainstormed in a meeting at Frontier Tower in San Francisco the day after the AGI conference. Some work we brainstormed on how to help Omega hives uplift themselves toward full general intelligence. I thought I was going to talk about that and say a few remarks on the AGI conference first. Instead, I've blathered on for 25 minutes about the AGI conference and various interesting things there. So I'm going to make self-improving Omega hives and other points.